So I'm going to begin with how I used to begin meetings at Wellington, and this recognises the fact that, we think that we're present, but most of the time we're not present. We think that our students are present, but most of the time they are not present. Your heads think that they are present, but they are never present. So we can do something about this, and we can do something about this. There's no point in saying of our children, students, pupils, that they are distracted. We can do something about it. So the most valuable thing I can do for all of you is what I'm going to do now in the next minute, which is to ask you to close your eyes. Oh, and feel the resistance. Yuck, he's not going to do one of those yucky mindfulness, psycho-babbly things. How weird to ask us just to sit with our bottoms on the chair and breathe. I mean, that is so weird. Getting over all of that stuff and just inhaling to the count of 3, coming in, count yourself, and exhale to the count of 3. And then add a 4 and a 5. And inhaling, coming in, deep breath, filling the whole lung. Count of 3 and hold it. And exhale to the count of 5. Deep exhalation. Already you're beginning to feel much calmer. And inhaling, really deep breath now, coming in to the count of 3. Coming in, 1 and 2 and 3. Hold, and exhaling out to the count of 5. All the way out. Inhaling through your nostrils. Much better to use the nose. Through the nostrils, deep breath in. And continuing with the eyes closed, just notice where you are. Hello everybody, welcome to this room. Your mind is now coming into the same space as your body. You're becoming present. And when we're present, we can learn and live much more deeply. You're noticing the sound from the aircon. You're noticing the sounds from other chairs, the children in the distance, the hum of the aeroplanes. This is all real. Okay. And just notice and just imagine, whether you're rethinking the curriculum or just trying to teach a good lesson or run a good meeting, how much better that could be if everybody was just still and present and calm, rather than thinking they are and thinking that we are. Okay. So opening the eyes and just beginning with 3 things. So I'm talking, hi everybody, just notice any difference. If there is any difference, imagine what that would be like if you did it every day, and how each time you do it, it grows in impact. I'm sure many of you do it anyway. 3 things just to begin with. First of all, the curriculum. I love this topic. I'm very proud to have been invited to this great school to talk to you today. Curriculum, first point, is I'm not quite certain what that is. I'm sure you're going to be exploring that today, and whether the curriculum is just what happens in the lessons, and can we really divorce that from everything else that we do, whether we are day or boarding schools, from the whole learning experience of young people. So I think that even if the talk today is mainly about what happens in lessons, we have to consider the whole of the pupil experience. Secondly, I absolutely know on curriculum reform and school reform that we are in a difficult position. Barnaby Lennon, absolutely right. And affordability and rising competition from the state sector and rising competition from digitalization, etc., which have become more of a thing. But, there's all that. But also, are we going to be market followers or market leaders? And in my own life, in schools, I've always tried to be a leader rather than a follower. And I think that if you in your own schools rethink what you are doing and don't just trade on league tables and trying to just do the exam thing. I mean, of course exams are important, but let's face it, exams and league tables, while being a necessary condition for a good school, they're not a sufficient condition for a good school. The sufficient is everything else you do, like education. And if you can really lead, I think you will not only get the pupils coming to your school, but you'll get the right kind of young people from the right kind of exciting, forward-thinking homes, and those parents themselves will be transformative. And ever since my first school, which was Whitgift in Croydon, I've seen the importance of getting parents deeply embedded into schools, and at Tunbridge forming the Parent Society, because there was a head who couldn't talk to parents, didn't know how to do that. And it's very important you get the right kind. And the third thing I want to say at the beginning is bad news, I'm afraid to say. I've got no PowerPoint. So sorry to break that to you. It's going to be just me talking, actually, to you. Okay, so those three things to begin with. Now I'm going to talk about looking in, looking forward, looking back, and looking up. And I'm absolutely saying, I'll talk about those four things, that the more that you can do this, the more that you can rethink your curriculum, the more that you can, as is Forest, as are many of your schools, I'm sure, be leaders rather than followers, this will actually sort out any recruitment problems and get you better and more interesting young people, because we have not used our independence. The independent sector hasn't truly to be independent. The independent sector throughout its recent history, as I've often said, has been much more like a state sector, afraid to innovate, whereas actually the innovation, as I'm sure many of you, I mean, the very fact you're here means obviously you're either innovating wildly, much more I'm sure than I ever did, or you are on the cusp of doing that. That is what the best kind of parents, sending the best kind of children, want to see. So it is practical. Right, let's begin now with looking in. And I want you to write down what you, not as a teacher or administrator, but what you remember from school were the best curricular experiences that you had. The best curricular experience. So what actually, you were in formal education for 16 years, at least, 3 at uni, maybe more, 13 at school. What actually really has been useful, really has made you think and changed you and made you into the fabulous human beings that you are today? Okay, so write down 5 things. So this is looking in. Because, we can't do it. There's no point in thinking about curricular innovation unless we are thinking about, our own experience. Just spend now a minute or two thinking about what can you learn from that? What can you learn from your experiences that you can put into your own schools more, right? A couple of minutes. There are real things that will have come up. Do we have any, just sharing any ideas that you have about practical things? Yeah.
Yeah, we think one of the most important things to try and recruit teachers who are very confident in their subject way.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work, but we try in our interviewing to shoulder
Okay.
barge people off the spectrum.
Because you had experiences of teachers who really knew,
Absolutely.
and your and the best one was, in your own experience,
But for myself, my
Yeah.
German teacher,
called
Peter Maudsley.
Peter Maudsley.
Maudsley.
Peter Maudsley. Right. Okay. Brilliant. Who had that real sense of depth of understanding rather than just knowledge. Yeah. Okay. Things. Yeah.
I had a great English teacher called Chris Rowe, and he was, what was great about him, I think, was that he, when you could have a conversation with him, and he
Yeah.
assumed you could have an intelligent conversation with him, and
Yeah.
indeed, you know, it was all about that kind of back and forth. He listened to what you said, he was
Yeah.
interested in it. It
Okay.
made him think.
Yeah.
So I suppose to be that person is.
Okay. So respecting and taking, going for people who respect and take young people seriously, yes.
I think taking my learning outside of the classroom. So when I went on my German exchange, actually, and I went and used what I've learned and
Yeah.
saw the relevance and learned so much more about the way it was anchored in the real world.
Yes. And the Institute of Education at London talks about the 3 or 4 different levels of learning. You know, one is just learning so that you can repeat it in an exam, which is beloved by Michael Gove and the education establishment. There's a deeper form of learning where you then can explain it to somebody else, which is why when your students are, I was always encouraging my own when I taught the best way of learning. I remember I learned to cello by talking it through in the Easter holidays before with friends. When you explain it, I mean, I find as a teacher, I find, you know, writing, the best way I learn is by putting it into words and helping young people to explain it. And then there's a deeper level of learning still when you apply it to the real world, service learning or whatever you're calling it, when the knowledge becomes far fuller, profounder and deeper. And yes, absolutely. So, I mean, there are some things. Okay, that was an example there. So that was looking in, reflecting back. And the first thing I would say to you on these 4 looks is reflect back, reflect more on your own learning. Think what great learning is. It was, you will find that also not just solves your recruitment issues if you do it properly, but it will also serve your league table positions because your students will be actually learning in a much deeper way and they'll be able to perform much better, partly because they're enjoying lessons, partly because they are actively learning. So that was an example there with you of active learning rather than me just standing up at the front and spouting. We learn. One reason I loved, there's a colleague in this room who's a physics teacher who'll be amazed about this. One reason I loved science lessons and would have done science A-levels had the cool people not done history and English, because I was such a strong-minded person, you know, was because we did experiments and we applied the knowledge, and it was wonderful. And how can you replicate all that applying of knowledge, which remains very tinny if it's just exam-based learning? So looking in. Now looking back, second one, and I do worry that the education establishment knows nothing about learning and the history of learning, the history of universities, the history of schools. So I refer back to the trivium. Can I just see how many of you come across the trivium? Some. Okay, so and there's a book by Martin Robinson, which is very interesting on the trivium. He's a very good speaker for your schools, Martin Robinson, and who's just produced a new book. So we go back to medieval universities and the idea of what learning really is. And the trivium spoke about 3 things. There was grammar. And grammar is the knowledge. So grammar schools were founded in part because universities were fed up that people were coming up to universities but not knowing things, not knowing enough. So grammar schools were there to teach young people the basics, all right? So grammar, you need to know you need to know and understand about knowledge and facts. Then you have logic, secondly, logic. And logic is the ability, as we were just talking there, to be able to manipulate that information, to own it, to make it your own, to be able to share it with others, to be able to fit it into real-world contexts, so that it becomes a much deeper, to be able to argue, logic, to have a dialogic, to have a dialogue with other people about the grammar that you have learnt. So logic is the altogether deepening of the understanding of what that knowledge is. And one reason why theory of knowledge is so great at IB, for those of you who do IB, but you don't have to do IB to have a theory of knowledge at the heart of your school, is that it's constantly probing away at the status of what is knowledge in different subjects. What does it mean to know anything, to be true? And then thirdly, you have rhetoric. So you've got grammar, you've got logic, and you've got rhetoric. This is the foundations of Western civilization, Western learning. What is rhetoric? Rhetoric is the ability to communicate what you have now understood and to communicate it in an attractive way on paper and in speech. The ability to be able to put it across in a learned and attractive and compelling way. Now, this is the trivium. Then there's also, we can put on top of that, the quadrivium, which includes harmony, music, harmony, and it includes astronomy, and every single school should be teaching astronomy, and not just in physics lessons. Thirdly, arithmetic, and fourthly, geometry. Now, when you've got those, you've got you get the trivium and the quadrivium. You have, of course, what do you have? You have the 7 liberal arts. These are the liberal arts. What are liberal arts? Liberal arts are there, the key is in the word liberal. Liberal arts are there to liberate the student to become an independent thinker. You are creating free-thinking people, discriminating, discerning people, students who are capable of forming their own opinion, as opposed to those young people who have just been trained or instructed, as are, I'm afraid, many of the schools who obsess about league tables. They are not looking at teaching the subject, they are looking at teaching, as you all know, what you need to know for the exam. Of course, the great schools do both. They both do very well, or do the best, get the appropriate grades for their students, but also educate them. So liberal arts, so it's different, can you see, from instruction. So instruction is what you need to be a technician, or you can be a highly skilled lawyer or an accountant or medic or pianist, just in an unthinking, unreflective kind of way, or you can be a creative individual who is freed up because your education has freed you up. And a problem with the exam test, very topical ideology approach, is that you shoot straight from grammar to rhetoric, and a very limited form of rhetoric about exam expression, without that logic step, which is the deepening, the manipulation, the owning, the application of the knowledge to one's own experience reflectively and to the world. That's look back. Then now look forwards. And we know, so we've done look in, we've done look back, we're now going to do look forwards. And we know that the young people that we are now teaching are going to live to, on average, what age?
85.
100 plus. Do we care? The answer, if we're honest, is we don't really, because, jolly nice for them, but we're not going to be there, and all we really care about is what happens on August the 23rd when the A-level results come in, and they can just bugger off and get on with their lives. No, but we ought to care. They're going to be living a lot longer, and there are at least 6 problems or opportunities that we need to embrace if we are to be doing a conscientious job of preparing our young people. And again, I would say if we can do this and free ourselves up from the utterly killing drudgery of the traditional exam-led curriculum, recognizing that if we do this better, we'll actually get better grades at exams, but also teach people better. If we can free people up, we'll also be preparing them better for life. So what are the 6 key challenges? First of all, global understanding. And it's great that you're going to hear somebody from Brighton College talking about Mandarin teaching. Where are you? Hi, that's fantastic. Brighton has led there, as in lots of areas. So it's in Mandarin. Also, of course, thinking about Arabic. We, with all the horrors of last week, with anti-Semitism, with deepening racial divides. Oh, that was what went wrong today. He was talking about, he was a Chelsea fan. And he was so excited about the win. Yes, they couldn't have cared about Leicester, but about Chelsea coming back against Spurs. But we divide ourselves up into these tribal groups, and the danger is we become ever more divided. I'm just back this weekend from having been to Treblinka, where you can see Treblinka killed the second highest number after Auschwitz, but killed them much, much more quickly. In 15 months, some 900,000 people were murdered there. These things, human nature hasn't changed in 73 years. Education is sublimely important at educating the heart, the need to educate the heart and the mind for global understanding and toleration. I'm in a university, and I am stunned by the intolerance on platforms at universities. So we need to teach people globally. Secondly, we need to teach for sustainability, which we can think is just something that the other guides do in the school, but a responsible school will put sustainability at the heart of the curriculum. It will, in 10 years, let me ask you, in 10 years' time, do you think it's going to be more of an issue than it is now, or less? I think it will be much more. So what are we doing about sustainability? Thirdly, what are we doing about mental health? And we can see, we now know much more. When we started talking about mental health 10 years ago, it was weird, and now it's mainstream. And why? Because we know much more about the rise of mental health, but also what we can be doing in our schools, not just to make our schools more psychologically healthy places, but also to help, we know that we can give young people the grounding to lead more successful, psychologically agile lives. So this is again a sense of responsibility. Are we just concerned with what the Telegraph or the Sunday Times table says, or are we compassionately responsible for our young people? The work of Marty Seligman is very well known, I'm sure, to all of you. Look up Action for Happiness, which gives you action for happiness, but which gives you very good guidance on what you are to do, getting young people ready for mental, to help have psychologically healthy schools, in which will also be much better places for you to live and work in. What are you doing there? So 1, 2, 3 was global understanding. 2 is sustainability, 3 mental health, 4 is the change in work. If you haven't come across the Harvard report from last summer by David Deming, D-E-M-I-N-G, David Deming at Harvard, you ought to look at that, because it ought to inform everything that you're doing in the second half of term when you are thinking about what you're going to be doing. Because what Deming is saying is that the very skills that schools currently constituted the world over, and PISA is monitoring, and league tables the world over, and don't think we have uniquely important national league tables in this country. We don't. There are others which are as distorting as they are in Britain. That the very skills that schools are focusing on at the moment are the very skills that algorithms will be able to do and replace. We are simply doing the wrong things. Yes, we need to teach knowledge and facts and skills, but we also need to be doing the things that algorithms will never, or not for a long time, be able to replicate, which are the human skills of compassion, of empathy, of teamwork, of insight, intuition, of problem solving, though of course they can solve many of the problems quicker than we can. And then fifthly, leisure. We've been promised, haven't we, all kinds of times that technological change is going to mean increased leisure, but in fact it tends not to do. But this is different. The digital algorithmic revolution is qualitatively different from anything that we have seen in our lives at schools. People will have more leisure, and we need to be able to educate people in the curiosity and self-sufficiency to be able to lead intellectually enriching lives without resort to alcohol abuse, drug abuse, or people abuse. And sixthly, the challenge is the challenge of boredom, apathy, cynicism, which is such a terrible blight. One thing I noticed about Poland from the moment that we boarded on Friday evening, the LOT airliner, was how glum everybody was. And as somebody who's tried to do things with happiness, and how disengaged everybody was that we came across. And there are terrible problems of unemployment with university people unable to find jobs, extraordinarily high figures of unemployment and depression and alcoholism and boredom. So these are the issues that we ought to be, if we are responsible human beings, caring about in our schools. And finally, 4 is, so we've done look in to ourselves, look back to the trivium, liberal arts, look forward to the challenges that our schools must be preparing the people for in our curriculum. Fourth is look up. And look up there is, look up unashamedly a sense of the spiritual, a sense of helping our young people become open-hearted, open-minded. I'm meeting at lunch A.C. Grayling, who is marvellous as a thinker, but I think profoundly wrong in his militant atheism. The best lack all conviction, the worst are full of passionate intensity, which applies not only to militant atheists but also militant theists too, who would crush and torture other people for the pursuance of their own narrow vision of the world. So I do think that we need to be helping our young people have that sense of awe. Look at the 12-point plan of Alcoholics Anonymous, the appeal to the higher powers, same there in Narcotics Anonymous, same there in Sex Addicts Anonymous. the appeal to something that lies beyond our own narrow experience is, I believe, an absolute necessity of every curriculum. And we need to have that sense for our young people. Mindfulness and stillness is one way of just helping young people notice. Because do you notice how little we notice? On your way here, have you ever driven across London and got out of the car and thought, oh my God, how did I get here? How did I get here from home? Have you noticed how much of your life goes past in just automaticness? This is the opposite of what the spiritual domain is all about. In spiritual connectedness, we notice other people. I notice this a lot with medics at the moment who, with a member of my family who's very ill, and that there are those who connect with her, and there are those who are absolutely inside their heads. And those who connect with her do her a power of good. And those who don't leave her feeling empty and abandoned. We have a medical school at my university at Buckingham. And did you know, I didn't, I took over every year, that that young people are studying medicine in university, in medical schools, they become more mentally unwell. Did you know that? I didn't. And these are the people, what? These are the people who are going to be looking after us. So where is that sanity that we can find? So conclusion, I would say just a 5-point plan for the curriculum. First is do the basics really well, the grammar, but then do it with also the logic as explained and the rhetoric as explained. Secondly, the human skills, sometimes misleadingly called, patronizingly called the soft skills, are clearly going to be extraordinarily important. Thirdly, make certain that the curriculum opens the mind, develops curiosity in our young people. Not that there's a right answer. Don't tell them what happens when two atoms interact, or tell them what happens when two sides interact in the Battle of the Somme. Give them the information and allow them to work it out. Great teachers, as you all know, let people work it out for themselves, because then it becomes their own information. That was the third one. Fourth one, put values at the heart. Values at the heart of education. The values, it didn't come out then when I asked you at the beginning, but it could have done. The experiences that you had would have had values in some sense at the very heart of it. And fifthly, it's active learning, not passive. So because think of those 3 different levels of learning that we discussed at the outset. So to conclude, those are 5 things that you might want to think about. It's a brilliant day. I think it's such an inspiring event. The Forest organised. Thank you very much, Headmaster. Thank you very much, Warden. Thank you very much, all colleagues who have organised it. Thank you, obviously, for coming. You have a brilliant day. Those are the 5 things which I think, and I think if you do those, this is not, you know, just kind of la land. Do these things, you will get more students, better taught, better staff, better atmosphere in the school, and we'll be doing the decent thing of actually caring for them, showing them love and compassion for all their lives, rather than just thinking about ourselves and our bloody exam results. Thank you all very much.